Welcome back to this old house here in Barrington, Rhode Island.
We'll see the framing for the new work go up.
And see how vulnerable our house on the beach really is.
Rhode Island is under a hurricane warning tonight.
65 million people along the East Coast could be affected.
I have never seen anything like this before. What am I looking at, Grover?
Well, this is essentially a sandbag on steroids. They've got nowhere else to go now.
So what's the prognosis for this house? Right here on this old house. Andy, you guys have been busy.
Yes, we have.
It never ceases to amaze me how much you guys tear these houses apart in the deconstruction phase.
Very necessary in this case because we need to take it apart so we can get to the point where we can put it back together the way that it's been designed.
All right, well, I don't want to cause any concern here, but I've been watching the weather, and there's a Category 3 hurricane coming up the East Coast. Does this bother you?
It will not be a problem. We will get this thing squared away and buttoned up before it gets here.
You're not worried? I'm not worried. All right. Well, let's talk about what you guys were doing last time I was here, which was just tearing off this little porch on the corner.
Right, and remember when we tore it off, we found that substandard foundation.
Right.
So what we did is I brought in my foundation contractor. We poured a good footing down below frost level. We put walls on it, backfilled it, put our slab on here.
Nice.
And our foundation continues down the length of this entire side of the house.
So down to a new corner here, right?
Exactly. So this is the only spot where we've actually added footprint to the house. So not only does it give them living space here in the basement, but it's also giving us this added feature on this corner for the upstairs, first floor.
So a little extra space down in the basement, but a lot more space upstairs, because this is actually where all the work is going on, obviously.
That's right.
Now, we've got the benefit of a model, so let's have a look at this right here. My recollection is the last time we were here, the house came to just about here, right?
That's right.
And so talk me through the new work.
So what we're doing, what we saw there with the slab is going to be this new entryway with this covered porch.
Right here, and this will be the foundation that we just looked at all the way down, right?
Exactly. So what we're going to do from the perspective that we saw there, the house is cut back to about this point right now. So the addition will include this area of the house to give us that new master bedroom and master bath and the new covered balcony, which I think is the best part of the house.
And this is the part of the house that looks out on the water, so there's gonna be some spectacular views from this balcony right here.
Right on Narragansett Bay.
And then there's a little extra space that you're adding. There's a small garage here, which exists here, and then you're gonna go up above it.
Correct. So once we rip off the roof, we'll put a new deck on there and put the addition on.
All right, well, models are only so good. We have got the real thing right here in front of us. Let's have a look inside.
All right, let's go through the garage.
Wow, you guys have been as busy inside as you've been outside, huh?
We sure have.
Everything is gone.
And what that does, it allows us to see what's inferior so we can replace it.
So last time we were here, there was a narrow galley kitchen running this length, and we were actually taking down a partition wall along here. I remember doing that, but I do not remember putting this big hole in the house.
Well, Kevin, that makes room for us to take this stairway here. The architect has moved it to the back of the house.
Yeah.
So this will allow for the kitchen to move back to this wall, so it opens up this space. And there'll be a nice island right here.
Okay.
So you'll still get that nice view of the water. Now, what you see here is a temporary wall to support the second floor as we do some structural work.
Because the homeowners really wanted that open floor plan, so this whole corner here is wide open.
Exactly. And what we're going to do today is get this steel in place so that we can take these temporary walls out of here.
So the project for the day, steel work.
Yes. We're using the machine to lift our first steel beam into place on this outside wall. Gotta come this way.
So you've actually set these on some steel columns and you're bolting them into place.
Yes, those are torque-controlled bolts. So what they'll do is they'll torque them down to the proper specification. They'll snap.
Oh yeah.
And then they'll weld them in place after.
So that little tip just snaps right off.
That's right. And after they're done with that, we'll drop the machine away and we'll put our second beam in place. Our second beam carries multiple loads. It carries our shed roof here, the main roof above, and our floor on the second floor.
Right.
So our beam needs to touch here and here. And what we've done is we've padded out the beam on the top and on the back side.
Oh, I see, okay.
So that'll allow us to hang the second floor off the back side.
So now we're ready to lift this in place?
Yes, we are.
All right, so you can take them in.
So we're gonna lift one end with the machine, the other end by hand.
Can you bring that end up a little? Yeah. Good. More?
Right there. Okay, now we'll temporarily brace it and then make our adjustments. George is welding the second beam to the first beam at its right elevation.
And it's actually got a little angle iron there to connect it to, huh?
Yes, makes it a nice structural connection.
And eventually all of this is going to be held together by welds, not these bolts.
The welds will be the primary source, yes. And now the third and final steel beam.
Andy, this is some pretty serious structure we've got in place here. I mean, those are 3 big beams.
Yes, they are. They carry a lot of weight, Kevin, especially over in this corner where we have what's called a point load. It's transferring the weight from up above down through that column to the existing steel beam that's in the basement,
right,
to another column that we have going to our new footing that we poured in the basement.
And now that the steel's in place, we can get rid of the temporary walls, and that gives us our wide open views.
Sure does.
All right. I'll tell you what, seeing that steel up there makes me feel a lot better about the hurricane coming our way.
Me too.
Rhode Island is under a hurricane warning tonight.
65 million people along the East Coast could be affected.
13,000 National Grid customers are in the dark.
If you want to leave, you should do so by tomorrow afternoon.
You know, Andy, we were kind of joking about this Category 3 hurricane, Hurricane Irene, that was coming our way, but it turned out to be no joke. I mean, look at this. We've got streets closed, we've got trees down. It ended up getting downgraded to a tropical storm, but it still whacked the East Coast pretty hard.
It sure did. It was a pretty rough day yesterday. We lost our power very early in the day.
It's still out, right?
It is. You know, also we had flooding, local flooding right here in town. The high tide, coupled with the fact of the storm surge that came up ahead of the storm, really caused some pretty good angst.
You guys were, what, a foot or two before you were about to evacuate your own house, right?
Exactly.
Wow. And in the wind, I mean, look at this. I mean, look at the size of this tree that is down.
Yeah, the damage is just extraordinary. I mean, you look around us, you can see that the wind was very heavy.
So how bad was the wind? I heard you guys, what, were topped out at the highest gusts?
We had the strongest gust in New England, right here in Barrington at 82 miles an hour.
The effects are obvious, and this tree right here and this block, impassable, and only, what, 2 blocks from our house?
Exactly, and this is just a small picture of what's going on in Barrington. Kevin, we're just a block away from our project house, and this neighborhood really took the brunt of this storm.
Apparently, right? I mean, look at this.
Yeah, some of these big old trees, unfortunately, have fallen on houses.
So now you really got me wondering, how did our house make out?
Let's take a walk over and I'll show you.
Well, how about that? She is still standing.
Yes, she is.
And go figure, the little house on the water with its side off ends up faring better than some of the neighbors.
Yeah, a big part of the prep was the bracing that we put in the house. Let me show you. Now, Kevin, we had a 6-foot tidal surge here on the bay, and it came up halfway into the parking lot here on the beach.
Right.
Now, with that tidal surge, that wasn't our concern. It was more the wind. So without this gable wall being here, the wind could have ripped this roof right off.
Okay.
So what we did is we took these 2x, tied them into the rafters on the gable, tied them into the 2nd floor deck down to the 1st floor. So everything was tied together so it wouldn't lift off.
All right.
Now, the other thing we're concerned about is the fact that the house could rack without that gable wall being there. So we threw in these cross braces from the rafters down to the center wall on both sides to prevent it from moving. And it really worked well.
Obviously, because we are still standing. But what about all the water? I mean, the rain must have just been coming through here for hours.
Yeah, we're not so much concerned about that because all the sheetrock and all the insulation is gone. Nothing to saturate. And the house has already begun to dry out.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
Well, let's take all the braces off and we'll get back to building.
All right, getting back to building. I like to hear that.
Well, it's been a couple weeks since the big storm blew through, and it's pretty much the end of the summer season, so things are pretty quiet here at Barrington Beach. The seagulls are the only ones hanging out on the beach, and all the activity is taking place on our project house. It's really coming along, and today Andy and his crew are working on the 2nd floor. With the new plan, we enter the house through this open porch, which will have an open rail made out of stainless steel cables. And because of this big window, the homeowners are going to be able to see their guests arrive as they come through the front door. which goes into a small vestibule. Once you leave the vestibule, you have a nice big open floor plan. Now the open floor plan was accomplished because of some structural steel. We have a steel beam that runs over this large window opening, and that's supported by some steel posts. Connected to that beam is another larger beam which supports the second floor and the roof. And that's supported by the only column in this space, this one right here. And it's at the corner of the island. Now we have unobstructed views. To increase the size of the kitchen, we removed the original staircase, which was right here. That's gone. Now we have a brand new staircase already framed. Up here on the second floor, some of the exterior walls remain. All the interior walls have been removed, and the roof has been taken off. Now we started with a very low-pitch roof, and it was decided early on by the designers that a steep pitch would look better and it would give us more room for mechanicals. And you can see the new outline right up there with those end rafters. Andy, what a dramatic change up here.
Yeah, we've made some pretty good progress. Even though we had that bad weather, we've really done well. Now, where you're standing right now is this new footprint. It expands so that we get this great master bath, and adjoining it is the master bedroom. And Norm, just look at the views that you get out of these areas from the master
finally,
bath.
nice big window so you can enjoy what's out there.
Right, and then you come through the master bedroom through this balcony door, out onto this grand master balcony, which will be covered at some point.
Right, so this is all private space for the homeowner.
It is, and this is my favorite spot. I'd be up here all the time.
So would I. So what's up today?
Well, we're going to start framing the roof, and we're going to start with the ridge. So on this part of the house, Norm, we're using a 2x10 ridge.
All right. It sits right on top of that stud.
Hey, you get that flush there, Mike? Yep. Excellent. Okay, that's half of our main ridge. Let's put in one of our ceiling joists.
Okay, so you're using 2x8s for the ceiling joists.
Yep.
And obviously they go side to side, and that's going to help tie the exterior walls together.
Right up against that. There we go. Excellent. Let's throw up some more rafters. We'll start setting some on your side, and then we'll alternate back and forth.
Okay. Okay.
Norm, what we're doing is we're taking off this little section of 2x4 because this stud supports our ridge as it goes back. Tell me when you're ready.
Clear.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'm seated. Looks good.
Now this is the door that goes out to the balcony, and you've built the header for it and set it on top of the wall instead of in the wall.
That's right. What that does is it gives us maximum height for a proper sized door.
So our rafters are cut off and we'll butt into it.
That's right, just like that.
Now the plan calls for a little bit of an overhang, so you've made a plumb cut on the rafters and installed this subfascia, which is a real hefty piece.
That's right, and that's necessary in this high wind zone that we're in, the 110. What it does is it allows for an attachment so that we can nail not just into the tails, but into that subfascia as well.
So it ties down the whole front edge of the sheathing, which we're ready for.
That's right, and we're putting up 5/8 tongue and groove on the whole roof.
All right. Well, you know, we made some pretty good progress today, and before you know it, this house is going to be watertight.
That's the goal.
Rhode Island has hundreds of miles of coastline, and when you build along the coast, it's important to realize that what you build has an effect on the ocean and its habitat, but also that the ocean is going to have an effect on your building. These houses down here are much more susceptible to storms and hurricanes, and in Rhode Island, there is an agency that oversees all of the building on the coastline, and the man in charge of that agency is Grover Fugate. Grover,
Hi, Kevin.
we've got one of those sites.
Yes, you do.
You know, it's right here on the ocean. How is this going to impact the coast?
Well, the first thing we worry about is impervious surface, because impervious surface will generate runoff. Runoff in this site makes its way directly to the ocean.
Not hard to imagine the car parked there that drops a couple bits of oil. But on the first rain, the oil is going to be right here in the water.
That's right.
All right, what else are we thinking about?
Well, the other thing we look at is the size of the development, because the larger the house, the more vegetation it's removing, and the vegetation acts as a filter for us. We're concerned about fertilizers being on the site, pesticides, pet waste, those types of things. All of those will have an impact on the bay. The pet waste, for example, will cause a closure of swimming areas like you have here, or shellfish beds.
And in terms of the size of the house, we actually had a small increase in the footprint, but we submitted a plan to you guys and we're okay.
Yes.
And in terms of the runoff, during construction at least, we've got hay bales here, which are pretty common. You put these around the perimeter. This will do something, but then also we've got the natural vegetation, and we had some discussion about what to do with these and how important this is.
Right. The hay bales and the silt fence will intercept the sediment that's coming off the site so it doesn't get into the water. And the vegetation acts as a protection device, particularly for waves. This shrub environment here is fairly deeply rooted, so it's much more protective than, say, lawn areas. Lawn areas are very shallow rooted, not as protective.
Okay, so that's a little bit of an understanding about how the house is going to affect the ocean, but the ocean is going to have a considerable effect on the house.
That's right. In terms of the effect on the ocean on your house, Kevin, we think of three things. The first is coastal flooding. This house is above the coastal floodplain.
That's a good point.
That's good. The other area that we worry about is wave attack. Again, this house is above the wave attack. Those are both good points for having a house location.
And when you say above, so the elevation helps us, but I'm also thinking, you know, when you're on a bay like this, that's got to help, right? Better to be on a bay than open ocean.
That's right. The space which wind has to blow over the water actually creates larger waves. So in this case, where we're in the bay, we're going to have smaller waves.
Okay.
The third thing we would worry about is coastal erosion. During the last 40 years, for example, this beach has lost 20 feet of space.
20 feet of the sand has disappeared over the last 40 years? I mean, that sounds pretty ominous.
That's correct, but it's not as bad as you might think. This site is a good site. It's got elevation for coastal flooding. It's got elevation for wave attack. I can take you to a site just 3 miles from here, Kevin, where the conditions are much worse. So Kevin, we're still in Barrington here, but this site is totally different than the other site. We're a little further up the bay, so we're picking up some wave action.
Yeah.
But in addition, this is a much lower lying site. The site that you were at, 15 to 20 feet above sea level. This site's about 3 to 4. So what that means is that we're going to get more frequent flooding here, much more intense storms affecting these structures here.
Okay, so we get lots of flooding, but I still see houses. People are still building here, they're still living here. How are they protecting themselves against these floods?
Well, the first and obvious way is the seawall. The seawall here, as you can see, is sort of holding the property line, so the property is left in this place here. But the bad side of this is that it's causing a loss of the beach. We get wave attack in the front, we get scour. Scour takes the sediment out and takes it out into the offshore environment. So we're losing our beaches here.
So you save the land on the backside, but you lose the beach on the front side. So it sounds like these seawalls are sort of pros and cons.
That's right. The second way we're going to deal with this site in terms of trying to safely build here is using elevation.
And by elevation, are you meaning artificial elevation by just building your house up like this one?
Right. If you notice this house here, for instance, as many of the others in this neighborhood, this is an older home. If it got taken out during a storm or if they have to renovate more than 50%, this structure is going to have to use elevation as they've done here.
So this looks like a 3-story house, but let me guess, the second story and third story is where the living space is, and then this ground level here, this is, well, I mean, it's just garage space, right?
That's right. This is a pile-supported foundation. It's intended that the storm surge, when it comes through, will take out the walls, leaving the piles and the structure intact.
Right. So it sounds like that even in a flood zone like this, people can build or rebuild their houses and still live here.
That's correct, but there are some areas in Rhode Island that we're starting to wonder whether we should allow people to rebuild or not. So Kevin, we're in a entirely different area here. We're in the south coast of Rhode Island. In this site, we can see all three factors starting to come into play. We've got a vast expansion of ocean for waves to build up over.
So this is wave action.
Wave action. We've also got the potential for storm surge here. In this site, it's a V19. That means that we have a storm surge of 19 feet coming in like a wall of water in this location.
So that's a 19-foot flood right here on this spot.
That's right. The third issue that we have to deal with is erosion. As you can see, we've got a lot of erosion in this area here. This is a product of both storm and coastal erosion. This structure was probably taken out in the 1938 hurricane here. You used to have a lot of beach out in front of it, all gone, structure's gone.
How much beach have we lost?
In this location here, we've lost about 125 feet of beach in 35 years of
So in the same amount of time as our site back in Barrington, it's 5 times the amount of erosion.
That's right.
And so we've got the triple threat. We've got the wave action, the flood, the erosion, and that's the result. The house loses.
That's right.
So what about a house like this?
This house actually has been moving back. It was about 50 feet seaward from its current location. It's moved back, but now they're at the edge of the wetland there. They've got nowhere to go.
And despite the fact that they moved back, I can see 2, 3, maybe 4 stairs already covered in sand.
That's right. And as you can see, they're right against the edge of the wetland. This beach is moving back. They've got nowhere else to go now.
So what's the prognosis for this house?
The prognosis for this house is in the long term, it's going to be history.
We're going to lose this house.
Right.
I have never seen anything like this before. What am I looking at, Grover?
Well, this is essentially a sandbag on steroids. It's a coconut fiber material filled with sand placed here to help stop the erosion or slow the erosion in this case. But unlike the seawalls that we saw in Barrington, it doesn't have the same destructive force on the beach. These things will actually deform to the slope of the beach as erosion occurs at the toe.
So you guys condone the use of these?
Yes.
Is it a permanent solution? I mean, is it going to save this house right here?
No, unfortunately, in the next 100-year storm event, this structure will probably go. Mother Nature's going to win.
Well, it is amazing to see the lengths people will go to live near the water. Thanks for sharing the story with us.
You're welcome.
So Andy, in terms of our site, sounds like we just got ourselves some pretty good news. We're not too worried about the floods or the waves, but we are going to have to deal with the wind because it is just going to keep blowing through this site.
And that's right, and that's why our engineers really focused in on securing this house to the foundation. You know, this continuous load path that we talk about from the roof using hurricane ties, hurricane straps, these wall ties, and right to the foundation with these hold downs will really lash this house to the foundation.
Great.
I don't think it's going anywhere. I think we have it covered.
All right, well, next time we will continue to learn about building here on the coast. And until then, I'm Kevin O'Connor.
And I'm Andy Tiplady.
For This Old House. So you guys are making great progress.
Yeah, very well.
Coming up next time on This Old House.
Today, we'll see how we're protecting our house from the elements.
We want to prevent any migration of water going into the house.
Here at the University of Florida, they have the largest portable hurricane simulator in the country. I came down to find out what it feels like to stand in the middle of a hurricane. That's next time on This Old House.